Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. The Minnesota Twins are looking forward to another great season in 2023, led by the return of All-Stars Carlos Correa and Brian Buxton. With the return of numerous players who were injured in 2022 and some new acquisitions, another division crown and a return to the World Series are in their sights. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to another episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's my pleasure to welcome back to our studio today a return visitor. He was last with us in February of last year. Jason Viana is the Executive Director of the Open Door Food Pantry right here in Eagan. Welcome back, Jason. Good to have you with us again.
Steve, thanks for having me back. It's my pleasure.
So I understand congratulations are in order. The Open Door has moved recently. Tell us about the big move.
Well, you know, Steve, as we discussed last time, we're only 14 years old as an organization, but we've had a remarkable period of growth. What started as a closet and a church is we've now become one of the top 5 hunger relief organizations in the state of Minnesota. And which is exciting, but also not, because you hate that there's that much need. But there's been such a demand for food support in Eagan and Dakota County that we couldn't do what we needed to do in the space that we had. And so we were actually in 3 separate buildings. We joked, put together with duct tape and shoestring, and now we're in one place where we can consolidate operations, work more effectively, and hopefully get more food to more people.
And this hopefully is able to move people through the facility quicker than before, right? Sort of streamlining your operations. You have a lot more space than you had previously.
Oh, absolutely. And part of it's moving people more effectively and efficiently through, giving a better experience. But a lot of it's being able to move food through more effectively and more efficiently because, we average 17,000 individuals we provided fresh and healthy food to last year every month. So every month, 17,000 folks. 70% of those folks will never come into the building. We have one of the largest mobile food programs in the state, and we take food so many different places in the community. The building represents a greater experience if you can get to us, but also more experiences if you can't.
Mm-hmm. And I understand, is this right? I saw on your website, I think, that your donors raised $500,000, about $500,000, to help facilitate this move into this new space that you're in.
I often describe the Open Door and other nonprofit organizations as we're a conduit for generosity. Right, the more people want to help, the more people we're able to help. We found a wonderful new space here in Eagan. We're leasing it, but we have to build it out. We were fortunate to get to design it ourselves, but yeah, we needed to raise $500,000, and our community stepped up and helped us find that in about 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to this issue of the scope of need for food here in Minnesota, which I think is a preeminent concern for people such as yourself and other people working to provide food for hungry Minnesota families. February this year, Hunger Solutions, which is headed by our good friend Colleen Moriarty, she's been a guest on our show several times. Hunger Solutions reported that in 2022, last year, Minnesotans made 5.5 million visits to food shelves. That was up nearly 2 million visits from 2021. during the height of the pandemic. How many individuals and families have visited the Open Door in the past year? You mentioned a monthly figure. What does that work out to annually?
It's hard to say exactly how many folks have come to us in the last year. With 17,000 folks a month, a lot of people come once a month. Some people come more often. We estimate that there were 24 to 25,000 individuals we helped. But if you look at it a different way, throughout the course of 2022, over 64,000 times someone in our community came to us for food, whether it was at our food shelf, whether it was at one of our mobile distributions, or whether it was one of our community gardens.
There's been a lot in the news this past year about the impact of inflation, and especially on prices of food. Any of us who have been to Kowalski's or Byerly's, we all know what this is about, or to Cub Food, the price of bread, the price of milk, the price of meat, all the essentials that you buy at the grocery store have gone up for everybody.
Right.
But this is especially difficult on working class families, low and moderate income families who have difficulty making ends meet. Tell us about this surge in demand that you have seen at the Open Door.
Well, we've seen more people ask for help in the last 3 years than at any point in our history. But I think, and I'll get to the inflation in a minute, Steve, there's a buried piece of that. Because I was at the press conference with Colleen, and Colleen is a tremendous advocate, a great voice for folks that need support in our state. And that 5 million visits, 5+ million visits, is such a remarkable number, but I think we miss part of the story if we say only that we had a record demand in visits. Because you can look back in 2019, pre-pandemic, the headline on Hunger Solutions was record number of visits, 3.2 at the in state food shelves. We have seen a tremendous increase in demand, but I think we've had an unmet demand for a long period of time. I think one of the things that's happened, Steve, since 2020 is we've had an influx of interest and support in hunger relief. And so what that 5.5 million visits or 5.2 million visits, what that represents to me and what I've seen in our organization is an investment in infrastructure. Because people that work at a place like the Open Door, and there's I think 500 food shelves in the state of Minnesota, the reason we weren't serving 5 million people prior, there wasn't space. There wasn't room. So when you look at the Open Door, we served 7,000 people a month in 2019, and we served 17,000 people a month in 2022.
So do you think it was the case that some people may have shown up at your door and they were discouraged by how many people were there, and that there just wasn't physically the space to handle the intake?
There wasn't available appointments. There wasn't enough open hours. There weren't enough mobile sites. There just wasn't enough infrastructure. And so when people ask about the Open Door, it's like, oh my gosh, you've grown so much. There are only 5 organizations in Dakota County, in the suburbs. There's just not enough support. And so as folks have invested in hunger relief, and whether that's pandemic funds or just general philanthropy, we've been able to create more opportunity. So it is a rising need, but it also speaks the story, Steve, of when you invest in the infrastructure of hunger relief, we make more opportunities available.
We've talked about the impact of inflation, and let's talk about a couple of the myths that surround the issue of hunger and food insecurity in Minnesota. I think many people have the false impression that people who show up at food shelves, oh, they're not people like me. These people don't work, they're homeless, they're in deep poverty.
Yeah.
But that's not true, is it?
No,
for
not
most
always.
people who show up at the food shelf. Tell us about who the people are that you see coming through the door at the Open Door.
Yeah, I think there's 2 buckets you can put folks in that we support. You know, over 42% of the folks that we provide food for are children. About 10% are seniors. So I consider those vulnerable populations. They can't always make ends meet on their own. The other half, I consider the working poor. The overwhelming majority of folks that come to the Open Door for food support have jobs. Many have 2. And I get the question, you know, folks lazy, why aren't they working? I've heard it more recently because every time you go to Chipotle or a hotel or wherever, they're all trying to hire, right? Like, why won't anyone take a job? There's so many job openings. but I'm not a macroeconomist. However, doing the research, currently, I don't know if you knew this, there are 4 million more jobs than there are people to take them. Labor for participation is higher than it's been in 20 years. But there's also millions more jobs being created. There's just not enough people.
You make a really important point there, because I think it's important for people to remember we all need to dig down below the surface, the superficial figures, and what things appear to be, and really delve into what are the root causes of this problem.
Right. And I always tell people the further you are away from a problem, the easier the solution becomes. It's easy to solve other people's problems.
Right.
I always encourage people to volunteer, whether it's with the Open Door or another organization. Get to know some of the folks that come. I think that certainly can alter your perspective. But you can also just look at the numbers outside of jobs. In Dakota County, there are over 40,000 households that pay more than 30% of their income for a place to live.
Wow.
And if you add the cost of housing to remarkable runaway food inflation, and increase in child care and health care. If you look at all the consumer price index issues, the cost of living is consistently rising faster than wages.
Right. And it's a good point to make. It's not just inflation on food.
Right.
It's not isolated to food. It's all these other things that people have to buy too.
Absolutely. And, back to the jobs point, according to the most recent data from DEED, I can never remember what that stands for.
Department of Employment and Economic Development, state agency.
That's why you're the host. Of the most in-demand jobs expected in the metro for the next 10 years, most recent estimate, 3 of the top 5 jobs they expect to grow don't provide enough of a wage to afford an average 2-bedroom apartment. So ultimately, regardless of your feelings on the matter, it's math. And if you can't earn enough to make ends meet, you need help. And that's what organizations like the Open Door do, is try to help bridge that gap.
One of your annual reports, we're going to revisit this, you and I have talked about this before, found that the federal poverty line, this a couple of years ago now, was at that time $25,750 a year. But the reality is, to live in Dakota County, where we are right now, costs $65,000 a year. So right there is the figure that illustrates this gap. There are 48,000 of our family, friends, and neighbors who live on incomes that are between these two numbers. And so hence this overwhelming demand for food assistance, for rental assistance, for assistance in paying their utilities during the winter, during our particularly bitter, long, cold winter that we've all just lived through. Do you have a sense that poverty is increasing in Dakota County?
I have a great sense that income disparity is increasing. And so whether you call it poverty or whether you call it just not being financially whole, there are more people, I think since 2020, we've had 60,000 people come to us for the first time that had never been to a food shelf. Now, part of that could be increasing poverty. Part of it is, thankfully, a decrease in stigma around needing help. We had a recent corporate partner come to us and make a generous donation. Never had a relationship with them before. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. How on earth did you come to hear about the Open Door? And the woman who worked for the company said, well, apparently you've been helping my parents for the last 3 years.
Oh my goodness, wow.
She said, they're pretty private. They're of the greatest generation. I sense they were getting some help, but they didn't mention it. And I came to visit them one day, and your truck was outside, and you had created a food shelf in the bingo room. And I saw the 2 bags on their counter, and I asked them, and they were like, yeah, we didn't want to make a big deal of it. People don't always make an issue. They don't advertise that they need help. But I guarantee you, Steve, you know someone, and your listeners know someone during the past 2 years that have needed help.
I know I do. And the thing that strikes me when I see interviews that have been on the news with people visiting a food shelf, they almost invariably say, I never expected I would need to come here. I never thought I would be the person who would need help. And this seems to be very common and underscores what you're saying, that maybe we can't say that poverty is increasing, but the disparity in incomes and the ability to meet all of life's expenses is definitely being stretched to the limit. Fortunately, it's not all bad news. There was a little glimmer of good news here in Minnesota. In March, Governor Tim Walz signed into law a universal school meals bill, which provides breakfasts and lunches at participating schools, making Minnesota only the 4th state in the nation, as I understand it, to provide universal school lunches. Do you think that this new law is going to help in any way to reduce the record-breaking demand at food shelves such as Open Door? And what might be some of the problems with the universal school lunch bill?
Well, I'll answer
or
your
challenges.
Yeah, well, I'll answer. All good things come with unforeseen challenges. But from a bottom line standpoint, this bill will absolutely be remarkably helpful for child poverty. So, blanket statement. Do I think it's going to decrease demand on our food shelf? Probably not in a remarkable way. I think what it's going to do is make it easier for kids to come home more fed. But anything we can do to increase access for meals for children will have a remarkable impact. I think as we look and wait for all the think tanks to do the analysis of what happened during the pandemic, all the steps, whether it was summer PEBT, free meals, etc., will have done more to reduce child poverty than anything the government has done probably in its history. And to the challenges of universal free meals, I think every school district is going to have to work harder to gather the data needed to qualify for the additional funding that comes when you have families that need additional support. But I have zero doubt in our school elected officials and teachers and social workers to gather the data. It's a tremendous statement by Minnesota that they care deeply about children.
Well, and I think it's a testament to the governor and the legislature that at a time when Minnesota is looking at a record-breaking state surplus, I think in excess of $17 billion was the last figure I saw. If there was ever going to be an opportunity or a moment when a state could move toward this, this was it. And to their credit, I think the governor and the legislature seized the moment.
And not to turn this into a legislature praise party, however, they also passed $5 million in emergency food shelf relief just to immediately address the demand that we're seeing. So they've taken some really good collective steps to help.
And I can't help but note, too, let's just talk about outside of Minnesota for a moment. I've noticed in the news a very disturbing trend that since the pandemic has ended, a lot of the federal aid, additional federal nutrition aid that came with the pandemic, that was part of the federal government's recovery effort, has disappeared. It expired and has not been extended. And in fact, you now see a number of states moving in exactly the opposite direction, restricting eligibility for participation in nutrition programs that are administered through states and even at the federal level. And this is a great cause for concern too, isn't it?
It is a tremendous cause for concern. You talk about what legislative action has a direct impact on hunger relief. The reduction of all the federal benefits that came through the pandemic, SNAP most recently in March, rolling back its additional benefits. Every one of those, every time something goes away, we see an increase. Currently at our food shelf here in Eagan, we don't have an available appointment until mid-June, which is 6 weeks from now. I'm not sure when this will air. So 6 weeks we're out for appointments. And that has grown every time relief goes away. And if you think about hunger relief, volunteer work, why the nonprofit sector? Why is it amazing, right? Because we solve social problems. We work with the government and with the private sector in the middle, but if you take help away in one area, the other area just has to make it up. So it puts great pressure on the emergency relief system and on volunteer-driven organizations like ourselves to help make folks whole.
The Open Door seems to me to be somewhat unique in the sense that nearly 2/3 or 64% of the food that you provide is fresh or perishable.
Right.
This means you're promoting healthier diets. Tell us about the Garden to Table program.
So our commitment, we built the organization around dignity and health. And giving folks the choice of healthy food has been priority for us day one. We've helped a lot of food shelves come along that path. But one of the best ways to get healthy food is to grow your own. And so we're building our 13th community garden this year. It'll be in Savage. And we have 350 plots where any of our clients that would like to can get a plot of land with seeds, water, master gardener volunteers, help to grow the food they most want. And most of the folks, Steve, that take part in our Garden to Table program tell us during the growing season, they don't need help from the food shelf. They're able to use the stuff out of their garden. So it's a remarkable program.
And we're talking about they're growing things like lettuce, tomatoes, maybe some corn.
That's the great thing.
Different vegetables, beans, things.
Pick your own poison. And so, you name some pretty good standbys, but for a lot of our Latino and Russian families, they get to grow things they can't find in farmers markets and grocery stores. And so the options are really limitless, but it allows you to grow what you like, and that helps your household the most.
Tell us quickly, what is the Mobile Lunchbox Program that the Open Door is involved in, and how many people have been fed through this?
Well, the Mobile Lunchbox Program is first place I volunteered with the organization before I worked here. And we take meals to students during the summer when they don't have access to school meals. And last year we went to 4 different school districts, which resulted in 26 different neighborhoods and over 40,000 meals that we put in the hands of students that would otherwise not have had them. This year, I'm happy to announce we're going to be in our 5th school district, we're adding South St. Paul. So
Are these all school districts in Dakota County? So right here in the South
Right
Metro?
here in South Metro. And we meet with the district, we'll talk with the social worker, the principal, and say, where are the neighborhoods you have greatest concern? And they'll list them, they'll help promote it. And we're like the ice cream truck. We pick up the lunches from the school, we drive through the neighborhood at the given time, kids come out, they get their meal, and it's been a remarkable program, a very easily scalable program, and one that we hope to have in every low-income neighborhood in the county in the next 3 years.
Really significant, because it seems like the school districts are a valuable partner for you in identifying where the need is so that you can address it with a laser focus.
Well, if you talk about just strategy for the organization, right? We built a brand new, beautiful food shelf, and if you can get to us and you need help, easy. If we're going to leave the building, we're going to use a partner or data to make sure that we are where the most vulnerable population is, so that we're using the most effective use of our support, our volunteers' time, and getting to the most people that need help.
Say a word, if you would, Jason, about the status of your volunteers at the Open Door. You've been a very fortunate organization.
Yes.
You have tremendous volunteers, including one of my dear friends and neighbors who we talked about earlier. Tell us about how you're doing in terms of volunteer recruitment and retention.
Well, we talked about the conduit of generosity, right? People that want to help, were able to help. We had over 1,203 volunteers last year give us their time. If you added up all the hours our volunteers give, it's like 16 full-time employees equivalent. We have 50 to 80 a day. So our ability to attract, recruit, and train volunteers, that's all of our jobs. Every person on staff is there to support and train volunteers to carry out the work, and we absolutely could not do without them.
And I imagine once people come and have an enjoyable experience volunteering, they tend to come back, right?
They tend to. And we build our infrastructure for folks that want to come back every week and for folks that want to come twice a year. We try to make it easy to say yes, and it's incumbent on us to make it easy for people to help at a way that it's helpful for their life.
That's a good observation. Jason, as you look ahead to the next couple of years, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing the Open Door and other food pantries?
Well, we solved our real estate problem, which was tremendous. I mean, I think our biggest challenge is if people had affordable housing, health care, and jobs that paid them enough money to be whole, we wouldn't be needed. And so when I think about the challenges we're going to see in hunger relief, I'm hoping that the trend will be better paying jobs, that we will solve the affordable housing crisis. That's my best hope. Now, my expectation is that we're going to have to continually build infrastructure. I have 20 senior living communities on a waiting list that have asked us to bring our mobile food program there. I think the biggest challenge, in a simplest answer, is donor and legislative fatigue. If people are like, oh my gosh, we helped, now we're going to move on to something else. We do not anticipate less people needing help in the next 10 years. We have to keep the focus and attention on making sure that anyone in our community that needs fresh and healthy food has access to it.
And we have to remember that because we live in a fairly affluent place, Dakota County is a very good place to live by any standard, not just in Minnesota, but by any national standard. There may be a tendency for people to put the blinders on and not see the need that is around them, that is often hidden or silent.
Yep. It is easy to see what we want to see, and I always encourage people to take a closer look. And again, that's why it's so important to interact with people that aren't in your immediate network. You've got to see the community for a whole. I think our representative from Meesville, Senator Drakowski, said he'd never met anyone in Minnesota that was, hungry, and that made me sad. I thought, you haven't talked to your whole district.
Right.
And I think that sometimes it's easy to live in our bubble, and so I would challenge anyone watching this. Get outside of your bubble, make friends from across the aisle, make friends from across the railroad tracks.
Talk to everybody. Yeah.
Talk and listen, because once you humanize it, no one likes to ask for help. Let's make it easy for the ones that have to.
And I think a thing that really stands out about the Open Door to me, the tremendous work that you do, one of the really great things about your organization, you mentioned it, that you treat people with dignity, that when they come in the door, they don't need to feel ashamed. They don't need to be embarrassed. There are thousands of other people in the same circumstance. You just need to ask for help.
And I think for your viewers, when you're logging onto your phone or your computer and whatever platform it is that you love to share your opinions, be kind in your words and realize that what you say matters. The way you talk about folks different than you, the way you talk about folks that need help, it registers.
It matters.
People hear it.
Jason Viana, Executive Director of the Open Door Pantry right here in Eagan, congratulations on your move to your new space. Thank you for the tremendous work that you, your staff, and your volunteers do to make our community a stronger place. Thank you for being on Access to Democracy.
Thank you for having me, Steve.